Imagine you're standing next to the most powerful rocket ever built. It's filled with over 2,500 tons of explosive fuel. Now, imagine it's about to blow up. How do you survive that? Well, NASA actually had a plan, and it involved one of the most incredible and secret structures they ever built. See, 12 meters right underneath the famous Launch Pad 39A, there's a place very few people have ever seen. It's a room that was designed for a catastrophe so huge, it was eventually just locked away and pretty much forgotten. Today, we're going to go inside. To really get why this bunker is so incredible, you first have to understand the threat. We are not talking about a little fire here. A fully fueled Saturn V rocket exploding on the launch pad would unleash the same destructive force as a small atomic bomb. The stakes were literally life and death.
So let's start by looking at this rocket's terrifying power and really get a sense of the sheer scale of the threat on Pad 39A.
The numbers here are just mind-boggling. We're talking about a fireball half a kilometer wide, hot enough to melt steel in an instant. There is no outrunning that, no way. The only option they had was to go down.
And that brings us to the escape plan itself. A 60-meter plunge, a desperate, high-speed escape into the Earth.
The journey was pure chaos. First, you'd have to race to level A of the launch platform. Then you'd dive headfirst into this hatch where sprinklers would douse you with water. From there, it's a 60-meter high-speed slide, plummeting through the concrete pad itself and then crashing into a room lined with thick rubber.
But here's the crazy part. This escape was incredibly dangerous all on its own. The water from the sprinklers would actually pool at the bottom of the slide, so test subjects would start to hydroplane instead of slowing down. In one test run, a worker hit the end so hard he broke several bones. The escape route itself was almost lethal.
But if you survived that insane slide, you'd find yourself inside a room built to survive a blast-proof bunker totally unlike any other.
So, this room was designed to withstand an overpressure of 500 pounds per square inch. Now that sounds like a huge number, but what does it actually mean for a person trying to survive? This chart really puts it into perspective. A blast pressure of around 40 psi is enough to be lethal. This room was built to withstand more than 12 times that amount. It was just absurdly over-engineered.
But it wasn't just the pressure wave in the air. The ground itself would shake violently, like a massive earthquake. So to fight that, the engineers built the entire room on what they called a floating floor. It literally sat on 24 gigantic springs, completely disconnecting it from the ground to absorb that seismic shock.
And the result of that floating floor was just astonishing. The explosion could generate up to 75 Gs of acceleration, a completely unsurvivable force. But inside the bunker, thanks to those springs, the crew would only experience about 4 Gs. I mean, still violent for sure, but entirely survivable. So the final step was to seal the room. There was this massive wheel on the blast door, and turning it would drive 8 giant steel pins straight into the wall, protecting everyone from the shock wave that would have come right down that slide. At that point, they were completely locked in.
So they survived the blast. But now you've got up to 20 people trapped in a sealed room, surrounded by toxic fumes with no obvious way out. This final chapter is all about their escape, the bunker's legacy, and how you survive the aftermath.
Okay, so how do you stay alive down there? Well, survival depended on these systems. In the center of the room, a CO2 scrubber would constantly filter the air. To create fresh oxygen, they had these things called oxygen candles, which would burn a chemical mixture to produce breathable air. And for food, they had military-style K rations and enough water to last all 20 people for up to 5 days. So when the all-clear was finally given, they had 2 escape options. Route 1 was a 360-meter-long, really narrow tunnel that led to safety on the edge of the launch complex. But if that was blocked, Route 2 sent them through a confusing, twisting labyrinth of underground environmental control rooms.
You've got to remember, this was NASA in the 1960s. They planned for every single contingency. So they asked themselves, what if the destruction is so catastrophic that both of those exits are completely gone, impassable? What do you do then?
Their final, last-ditch hope was an emergency hatch at the very top of the dome. And this is the wildest part. This hatch didn't lead anywhere. It was basically a beacon. If the crew is trapped, a rescue team would have to literally dig down through meters of solid concrete and sand just to reach that hatch and pull them out.
So, the bunker was built for the Apollo program, and it stood ready for every single Saturn V launch. But thankfully, it was never, ever used. After the program ended, it was sealed up, totally abandoned, and just left to become this perfect time capsule of the space race.
Ultimately, the rubber room and the blast bunker are just one of the most remarkable safety systems ever conceived. It was an extreme solution to an extreme problem, and it's a real testament to the engineers who had to sit down and imagine the unimaginable.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? You know, as we push further out into space with these new, powerful rockets, we are standing on the shoulders of this kind of incredible, often unseen historical engineering. What other forgotten marvels are still out there, just waiting?